Hey guys, what's up? I hope you're doing really well. Today I wanted to talk to you about another foreign language series. It's now available on Netflix. It's Icelandic. It's a couple of years old now. It's called Case. Note that it's not a Netflix original. While doing my research for this, I discovered that Case is technically the third season of an older Icelandic show called Réttur, or Court, and it features at least two of the same characters, the lawyers Lauhi and Brunhildur. So I didn't even know that when I watched this series, but knowing that does make sense of a few things we hear. Nevertheless, the story we see in Case is a standalone story. It works completely on its own, but it does seem like there is some backstory to the characters that we have not seen. Case could almost be regarded as a spin-off of the original show Court, but it is technically a third season under a different name. Now I'm curious to see the original show Court, but I'm having some difficulty finding it, as you can well imagine. First up, language aspects. Unusually for a Netflix show, you cannot watch this in English. You can watch it in French, German, Spanish, English with audio description, or the original Icelandic. I always watch stuff in its original language, but I'm just mentioning that because I don't want to be snobbish about that kind of thing and be like, oh, if you watch it in dubbed, then it's not the real thing. Nothing like that. It's just weird that you can't watch this one in English. It is, however, great news for people learning Icelandic. Yes, I know, they are out there. This one is 100% in Icelandic. There are no foreign characters, there are no trips overseas, anything like that, so all you get is complete Icelandic. Overall, I liked this series, and I often felt like watching more, but at the same time, I can agree with both the positive and the negative reviews. The positive things say like it's thrilling, it's gripping, it's realistic, it has that understated Scandinavian style, to which I would say yes, 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 and yes. The negative reviews often say things like it handles material that most of us do not want to see. I completely agree with that. And sometimes characters make extremely stupid choices, or at least very stupid inaction to things that are happening. One criticism that I do not agree with is that it was too slow and too long and could have been compacted from 9 episodes into 4 episodes. I definitely don't agree with that. In fact, if anything, I would say it's the other way round. It felt like it could do with an extra episode, because we're often lacking context to scenes, and this comes mainly from a lack of establishing shots. It sounds like a little nitpicky film school kind of thing to say, but we get no establishing shots, and that often makes it just a little bit hard to figure out exactly where we are, especially when there's so much story and so much character entanglement. He was here and she was there and blah blah blah, and we just don't get any idea of who's talking to who sometimes before we're straight into that scene. We don't get any breathing space to process these things that are going on. Another thing that I felt the lack of here, for those very reasons I just mentioned, was episode recaps. I know they're less and less popular these days because we're seeing more subscription-based TV services where you've just watched the episode, you don't need a recap, but for a series as complicated and intertwined as this, I felt like they really could have been used. And another thing that makes this series just that little bit more difficult to follow is that, like the other Icelandic series I reviewed, Trapped, the character names are very, very hard to remember and to thus know who they're talking about when they're talking about this character and this character, because unlike, say, Spanish, the names just bear no resemblance to names that we English speakers are familiar with. So it's not that hard to remember, for example, Alejandro, because we would sort of associate that with Alexander, but it's much harder to remember, for example, Lauhi Traustason. Just for the record, I know that's not the fault of the producers of the series, it's just something to be aware of if you only speak English. Far be it from me to complain about anything Icelandic or even Scandinavian, I'm just mentioning it. Some of the things I liked about this series was that it did feel very noir in the older sense of the word, so parts of it actually reminded me quite a lot of The Big Sleep. If you haven't heard of that, it's a 40s movie that is considered one of the pillars of noir from long before there was any such thing as Nordic noir. One of the hallmarks of that genre is that we start with one thing and then it spirals out into something much, much bigger, and the one thing almost becomes like a side plot to what we're actually now seeing about all this stuff that's going on under the surface. That was one of the kind of original ingredients of noir, and they've done that really, really well here. I also liked quite a few of the characters. A lot of them were very, very broken people, but that didn't feel forced. You see a lot of series where the writers have obviously made a character, say, an alcoholic, because the character just wasn't interesting enough, so they've given them some really obvious flaw. But this did not feel like that. This felt like genuine characters with genuine human problems, not all of which are the same size, but they're all broken and trying to sort out their own things in some way. I also really liked the acting. Iceland has no shortage of talented actors, talented film producers, musicians, visual artists. They put a lot of value in that stuff, and it really shows. Despite Iceland's tiny population, they're always able to get a good cast, good directors. I've also mentioned the intricacy of the plot. All of the false leads lead somewhere else, like they should. Writers, don't do that. Okay, so I didn't like the content, and hopefully no one does, but some people are going to have a higher tolerance for it than others. Personally, I found myself doing this quite a lot. Like, I just didn't want to see it. We're talking underage sex trafficking, drug addiction, forced drug addiction in order to fuel the sex trafficking. It's all presented to you quite unequivocally and very in your face. There's a lot of nudity. It's pretty full on. I personally would prefer stuff that conveys this more subtly. Equally, the eventual villain in this series is just a little bit too evil for me to believe that it's actually genuine. If you agree with the phrase that the best villains are heroes of their own story, then you'd probably agree that this villain isn't great, because their motivations just don't seem very realistic, and they would not even believe that they're a hero of their own story. They feel like they've been written purely for us to believe that they're the most evil thing, and it comes off a little bit ingenuine. The choices that some characters make, most of them are totally fine, but some of them are extremely stupid. Like, parents will get their teenage kids back after these week-long drug binges where the parents don't know where the kids have been and stuff, and they just sort of send them upstairs to their room with complete access to their phone and their laptop, and then the kid escapes to get more drugs, and the parents are like, oh no, they climbed out their window to get more drugs, and you're like, yes, have you never seen a movie with a drug addict in it? There were also some characters that I just wanted to see more of. I felt like they were really interesting as characters, and I just wanted to see them fleshed out a little bit more. I also feel like an extra episode could have been used for some reiteration. I know that people don't want to feel like they're being treated like they're stupid, and I know they don't want to be told everything a million times, but in this series you're sometimes not even told anything once. You just have to put together who has alibis for what time, which two characters were in the same place at which time, and it's all a bit complicated. It's a bit of a shame, because I think that altogether this series would have excellent narrative causality, but we kind of don't know if it does or not, because you would have to sit down with a piece of paper to work that all out. I think this series would benefit chiefly from two things. The first is a second viewing. I haven't had time to watch it twice, but I think if I were to, I'd be able to see that all the plot points do make logistical sense. It's just that we're not really able to get that the first time through. We would also be able to see how difficult it is to actually write something like this, where everything does line up, right time, right place, and it all makes sense. Unlike this, and yes, I am going to have another go at it because it sucks! The other thing I think it would benefit from is more competent direction. So I think the director knew what he wanted us to perceive, but wasn't able to get that across. He knew how he saw it, but he wasn't able to get us to feel it that way. Unlike Trapped, this director actually went on to direct episodes 2, 3 and 4 of Trapped, so I think he learnt quite a lot from directing Case. Do I think Case is worth watching? Yes, if you don't expect perfection. There's actually a lot of interesting things going on here. There's a lot of good sequences, there's some tense moments, but it just doesn't have that same sense of foreboding that Trapped has. Unlike Trapped, it feels much smaller, even though it's set in Reykjavik, which is a much bigger city than the one Trapped is set in. Everything seems to carry less weight. However, in this series, it's much more worthwhile to watch, I'd say, than something that seems competently directed, but is just stupid. For example, Midnight Sun, Blue Eyes, both of them were just political agendas disguised as a series, basically. Guys, thank you so much for watching. I hope you found this helpful. If you, like me, enjoy foreign movies and series, then please check out my other videos to see some other things reviewed. Please consider subscribing so you can help motivate me to do more of this content for you guys. Wherever you're watching from, whatever language you speak, I really hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you next time.